Dumelang, welcome to Face the Nation. My name is Clement Banyatela. Great to have you with us here on SABC News. On the show tonight, what is behind the DA's Federal Executive Chair, Helen Zille's decision to approach the court to challenge the Expropriation Act? And what does it mean for the Government of National Unity? Zille has approached the court arguing that the bill was passed unlawfully and without a proper mandate. She speaks to us tonight. Also on the show, what should South Africa's ambassador to the US do to resolve tensions with the US, given that other organizations like the DA and AfriForum are also meeting with the same people he's also meant to be meeting? Do we actually have a coherent, common message as South Africa, or is his job frustrated by the other interested parties in this matter? Ambassador Ibrahim Rasul speaks to us tonight. And then later, isn't US President Donald Trump's plan to own and develop Gaza illegal under international law? Isn't America, like any other country that is a member of the United Nations, obliged to respect territorial integrity? Well, the women in charge of investigating Israel's occupation of the Palestinian territory at the United Nations, Dr Navi Pillay, will speak to us tonight. But first, my comment. So, Tutu Zille Zuma, the daughter of former President Jacob Zuma, has now apologized for the remarks that she made towards the MK Party's Secretary General Floyd Shivambu on social media. But that apology is not directed to Floyd Shivambu as the Secretary General, as instructed by her father and leader of the MK Party, Jacob Zuma. She only directs the apology to the leadership of the party. So let's give you some context quickly to those of you who may have missed what happened last night. Tutu Zille Zuma insulted Floyd Shivambu in a series of posts on X. She used profanity, calling Floyd the worst thing to ever happen to the MK Party. Among her posts, she wrote, and I quote, "I'm not scared of you, Floyd," end quote. A harsh reprimand was soon issued by the MK President's office, which is headed by Floyd's friend and close ally, Makgasela Mngome. And in that statement that was released in the early hours of the morning, the MK Party President, Jacob Zuma, calls on his daughter to apologize to Floyd and even to the MK structures, or face her membership being terminated. And once she apologizes, that statement said she will face disciplinary proceedings. So Tutu Zille also posted that they will expel me tomorrow. It is well with my soul. Oksalayo, Floyd is useless. That was the tweet. But then earlier this afternoon, she released a statement apologizing to her father, to the leadership and structures of the MK Party for how she conducted herself. She said in the statement that, and I quote, "I acknowledge that expressing these grievances publicly was unfortunate and may have undermined the party's and the unity, the discipline and the respect that defines the MK Party." She went further to say, "My deepest apology for any offense caused in this regard," end quote. But this apology is not directed at Floyd Shivambu. And her father was very clear in the statement that was released late last night that she must apologize to Floyd as well, on top of the entire leadership and the structures of the organization. And I just think it was just a matter of time, wasn't it? These internal battles in the MK Party caused by the unhappiness about a group of people who recently joined the party only to be parachuted into positions of power. Let's be honest, that has caused unhappiness amongst other MK Party members who have been with the organization from the start, but have been overlooked or demoted to accommodate the newbies. Some MK Party's members have actually said that Floyd Shivambu is having it hard on the ground, that there are people who are not happy with his appointment, who feel that they were demoted or overlooked while he and the others took over key positions in the party. When Zuma appointed him to this powerful position, he seemed to be accepted by party members. Remember that? You said earlier today outside court that, there are people coming from the EFF and they must not come here and take over what you guys have worked for. Is this the general sentiment of MK members on the ground about some of these members coming from the EFF?
That's what I'm hearing on the ground. But I was speaking for myself, because at the end of the day, that if you're not being honest to the organization must not even trust you more. I'm honest to the organization to say that you cannot see a person joining Mkhonto Wesizwe 2 weeks before, and the next thing you give that person a role. How can we defeat EFF on the elections? And then from there you make the same person to be the face of the organization. We could take anybody in the province and put that a person there. Okay. So I'm saying that I am not demanding to be the convener of the province.
So that was Mary Padi on the show, who is the former MK party convener in Mpumalanga. And she was talking about this unhappiness I was talking about, that some members of the MK party are unhappy. They are concerned about Floyd Shivambu, about some people who came from the EFF and other parties who are suddenly made to be members of parliament. They're given these key positions and they're asking, what about us? We've been here from the start, from the beginning. Now, here's the former president talking about Floyd Shivambu and how capable he is for this job.
The interpretation of the comrade who's sitting here that I'm standing next to, this one, you don't know. They're politicians and politicians. This comrade I've known from when he was very young in the ANC Youth League. That's when I picked him up that he is a real politician. His politics, which I defy as scientific politics.
It is scientific politics, but is it being appreciated on the ground by members of the MK party? And the former president actually warned members to be disciplined. It's almost like he could see what was coming.
I'd like to thank the comrades who are here and the ones who have been identified to lead this organization. And indeed, we want to bring changes. We want to have an MK that is disciplined, that respects people, that is standing for the interests of the people. That's what we want to do. We don't want to see any one of us doing something wrong.
So that's what the former president said. I do also think that it was a matter of time before Zuma's daughter started acting up. I mean, she was flagged even before elections last year by some in the party as entitled, as problematic. She exercised a lot of power at the time because it was her and her father and the others. But now there are proper structures in the MK party now that are in place. And some of the power that she probably used to have is gone. Most of it is concentrated in Floyd Shivambu's office. And that's probably frustrating her. One thing we must be clear on, though, is that this is normal in politics. And I don't think we should make the mistake of writing the MK party off just because of some squabbles between leaders. It happens all the time in many other parties that are still standing today. So the question we're asking you tonight is, what do you think is at play here in the MK party? It appears, at least to me, that the concern Dudu Zille is raising is shared by some members in the organization about Floyd Shivambu's position and how he's doing things, whether those people are right or not. So how should the party deal with this? You can send us a WhatsApp voice note right now on 078-459-1897. Remember to tell us your name and surname and where you're sending the voice note from. And please keep it at 30 seconds. Alternatively, you can send us an X on @FaceTheNation SABC. When we return, we start the conversation with the DA's Federal Executive Chair, Helen Zille. Stay with us. Welcome back. The Democratic Alliance is challenging the Expropriation Act in court amidst an international outcry regarding the legislation. Helen Zille, who is the DA Federal Council Chairperson, has initiated court proceedings to contest the act, emphasizing that the DA is opposed to the bill since introduction in 2018. Helen Zille joins us now via Zoom. Helen, thank you so much for making time for us. Good evening.
It's such a pleasure, Clement. Good evening.
So as the DA, you released a statement last week after President Donald Trump threatened to cut aid and said, and I quote, "It is not true that the act allows land to be seized by the state arbitrarily. It does require fair compensation for legitimate expropriations in terms of the Constitution. It's unfortunate that individuals have sought to portray the act as an amendment to the Constitution to allow for expropriation without compensation," end quote. So what are you challenging exactly in court now?
Well, the Act does not amend the Constitution. That is correct. It does not amend the Constitution. But it does open the door for expropriation without compensation at quite a large scale. And it makes it very much more arbitrary than it should be. And it enables restitution and land reform, which we support and which are already dealt with in 3 other acts, be put into an act where it doesn't belong. This particular act deals with questions of expropriation public land for infrastructure, for roads, for railways, for bridges, for dams, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it brings the possibility and the very great likelihood of abusing the act into the future and abusing it for the purposes of getting around many different barriers to expropriation without compensation.
Okay, let's look at specifically this current court challenge, right? My understanding is that you argued that this act, or when it was a bill, was passed unlawfully and without a proper mandate. What do you mean by that? And I'm trying to figure out here. So your issue is not about, is more about the process that was followed to pass this bill and not so much what it entails and the nil compensation in this particular court challenge.
Well, in this court challenge, we're following the strategic advice of our lawyers. And our lawyers are extraordinarily good strategists. We very rarely lose a court case with them. And they have said to us repeatedly, if you're going to challenge something in court, do it on the point in law that is the quickest, easiest, and most direct. And what they've said to us is, yes, while you in principle most strongly oppose opening further doors to expropriation without compensation, your very easiest and direct line to a potential victory is to challenge the process whereby this act was supported by various provinces in the National Council of Provinces. So we listened to their strategic advice, and that's what we're doing.
Oh, okay. Is there a reason why you didn't wait for the clearinghouse to deal with this matter first in the GNU before approaching the court? Or was the matter dealt with and there was no agreement?
No, it wasn't dealt with, and John Steenhuisen, our leader, specifically invoked clause 19.3 of the Statement of Intent, and that requires sufficient consensus. So we invoked that particular clause, and we said we were going to take it to court. So this hasn't been to the clearinghouse, but I must tell you that the clearinghouse has turned out to be a bit of a farce, because we made good progress in negotiating compromises around the Bella Act, and then in the last minute, the ANC just brushed it all aside and did what it wanted to anyway.
Okay, but in terms of the Statement of Intent, isn't it that you have to at least approach the clearinghouse before you can consider anything else outside? So that's the first point of call.
No, the Statement of Intent says there has to be dispute resolution mechanisms.
Yeah.
But the clearinghouse mechanism is not a dispute resolution mechanism. Firstly, we haven't agreed any terms of reference for the clearinghouse. And until we've got terms of reference for the clearinghouse, it's going to be very difficult to run them fairly and properly. And as we've seen from what happened in the past, it was just a means of manipulating to get what the ANC wanted anyway.
Okay, so you will follow the two processes, even though you're not so confident in the clearinghouse or whatever process exists within the GNU to resolve these matters, because you really haven't found happiness with how matters have been dealt with.
Well, we will first insist on terms of reference for the clearinghouse, yes, and rules of the game for the clearinghouse so that it can't be abused again in future, yes.
Okay, let me ask you this now, Helen, because when I spoke to you, I think it was in December last year, you indicated that, I had a conversation with you about what Trump had said at the time, and you indicated that you had conversations with Trump's advisors, and you said that Trump is not playing. We must be careful and stop playing games. When you saw what he tweeted last week and the executive order that he signed, do you think that it was justified?
Well, he got it wrong when he insinuated and implied that whole-scale land expropriation was happening right now without compensation. That is not correct. But the truth is that the Expropriation Act does potentially open the door for that. And I think he was probably given a quick briefing around the passage of the Expropriation Act and interpreted as not only opening a window, but as it factually happening already. And so he was clearly wrong about that, and we did put him right about that. But we did say and confirm that the Expropriation Act opens up the possibility of such an abuse of power.
Yeah. And as the DA, what is your position on the refugee offer that he made to the Afrikaner community here?
You know, Donald Trump is a very crafty politician. He knows that the biggest punishment for South Africa would be to strip some of its key skills from the country. And he knows that the economy would take a very serious knock if he were to find a way of extracting the key skills from South Africa. And he also knows that he would get a major investment injection and skills injection for America if he were to do that. So obviously we would strongly urge people to stay in South Africa and to work to try and do whatever we can to make our country succeed and make our country prosperous. But Trump is very canny. And when he makes a move like that, he knows he's thought about it. And
do you, because there are a few organizations that are saying, I spoke to the SA Chamber of Commerce in the US, they're saying there are quite a number of people that have made requests for information about this refugee offer. Do you agree, though, that white people are treated unfairly in this country, particularly the Afrikaner community?
Well, if you look at what the Bella Act is trying to do, you will see an example of that. And if you look at about 115 laws on the statute book that have been passed since democracy that reintroduce the right of the state to judge people according to the color of their skin and apply race-based criteria through the state on the population, you can see very clearly that it is very problematic. And obviously many whites feel that the law is being used against them.
But isn't that government trying to redress the injustices of the past, as in fact encouraged by the Constitution? How else do you bring black people to participate in the economy if you're not going to bring about policies that are going to be intentional about bringing them into an economy that they were never given an opportunity to participate in during apartheid?
Indeed, and that must happen. We believe in redress, we believe in restitution, but the ANC's mechanisms have not worked. They have not worked at all. We have over 50% youth unemployment on the limited measure of unemployment, maybe over 62 on the expanded definition. And we have well over 30% unemployment for the rest of the country. So people are getting poorer and poorer and poorer and less employed and more marginalized from the economy. So it's obviously not working, all of these laws. All those laws do is actually marginalize the poor from the economy more and more, because it chases away investment, it shuts down jobs, and it makes things more and more difficult for people to participate in the economy.
Yeah.
The only people that benefit are the people with good connections in the ANC who want to use their connections to get a big piece of every state contract because of the color of their skin and enrich themselves, massive corruption, and the poor get poorer and poorer. So if those laws had helped to address the legacy of the past and get people out of poverty, it would be one thing to say we have to apply them more. But the fact is they've made things worse, and a lot worse for many people. So we have to use a different method.
Yeah, so and I'm interested in what method you think as the DA we could use. But just to respond to the failure, because it's often generalized in that these laws are not working, but that's not necessarily true. There are people that have benefited from employment equity legislation. I mean, you go speak to, for instance, even the big business guys, speak to the Standard Bank Group CEO, Sim Chabalala. He will tell you.
I know him
that,
well.
Yeah, he'll tell you, I'm a product
He's my friend.
of that. I'm a product of that policy. Go to the first black CEO of APSA, Daniel Minele. When you have institutions being forced to be deliberate about transformation, they actually do get equally equipped black people so that we change the structure of the economy. Because even the Employment Commission will show you that even in top positions, you still have a concentration of white people occupying those positions, over 58% or so. So how do we bring them into that sector as well? Because there are black people that are equally capable of holding these positions if it's not going to happen through these kind of legislations. And I'm saying, albeit with the limitations that it has.
Well, firstly, nobody wants to keep capable black people out of being at the very top. Everyone wants them to be at the very top. And everyone is searching for people in those jobs. But the problem is not at the top. The problem is at the bottom, where more and more people are out of the economy entirely. And if you ask a cross-section of business people who've invested in South Africa and who've considered investing but have been turned away, if you ask them what is the biggest deterrent, and polls have been done, number one was the electricity crisis. People said that the lack of reliable electricity was a big deterrent to investment, and any deterrent to investment is a deterrent to job creation. And the second biggest was all of these laws, these BBBEE laws that drive away investment and make the poor poorer and poorer, and drive away jobs and drive away opportunities on the ladder. And those are the people that restitution needs to look after.
What's your suggestion on how we redress the injustices of the past? How do we, what is a policy as the DA you think can work? Because obviously, I'm sure you agree, the playing field is not leveled here. There are white people that were privileged during apartheid who had the opportunities to get into any sector. You've got black people who didn't have much of those opportunities. So they are much behind their white counterparts. So how do we bring them to a point where this is now the playing field is leveled?
Well, you're exactly talking the right language. You're talking about expanding opportunities, not manipulating outcomes. And obviously it takes time to completely level the playing fields. But the first thing you've got to do is fix education. If you've got children who can't read for meaning at the end of grade 4, you've got a very serious problem. Then we've got an entire economic justice policy, the most comprehensive restitution and redress program of any party in the country. And this is an economic redress program based on the Sustainable Development Goals that looks at how we empower the poorest of the poor and harness businesses across the board to ensure that more opportunities are opened, more training is done, more jobs are created, more investment occurs, and so that it really benefits people who've been left behind.
Yeah. Just before we wrap up then, Helen, when I posted the conversation I had with you in December, where you almost preempted what was coming following your trip to the US, to London as well, a few people were saying, look, she's the person who was having conversations with Trump's advisors. It's not a surprise that Trump is acting in this way. So do you think the conversations you had with Trump's advisors, and maybe even the conversations AfriForum had with the advisors, may have led to Trump also taking this decision that he's taken now against South Africa?
The last thing I would ever do, the very last thing I would ever do, would be to tell in America, let alone Trump's advisors, that they must withdraw the aid, the PEPFAR money for AIDS, and withdraw trade concessions. The DA has done more than any other party to try to save AGOA and the preferential treatment South Africa gets from the United States. It's not those of us who listen to Trump's advisors when they tell us what's going to happen that are the problem. It's parties that pass an Expropriation Act. And more than anything else, it is the party that becomes the pivot around which all the anti-Western forces of the world are coagulating. If the ANC is going to act as a proxy for Iran, and if it is going to turn BRICS into a geopolitical force for anti-Western countries, it must not expect the West to continue funding so many of South Africa's programs and giving us preferential access to trade.
Helen Zille, thank you so much for making time for us. After the break, we'll have a conversation with South Africa's ambassador to the US, Ibrahim Rasul. Stay with us. Welcome back. South Africa's ambassador to the US faces a tough challenge as he sees to mend strained relations between the two nations. US President Donald Trump has indicated that he will not commit to attending the G20 summit in South Africa this year. The US President also recently signed an executive order cutting off aid to South Africa and allowing Afrikaners the chance to resettle in the US. Trump claims that the Afrikaners face racial discrimination in the country. Let's bring in South Africa's ambassador to the US, Ibrahim Rasul, who joins us now via video link. Ambassador, thank you so much for making time for us. Good evening.
Good evening, and thank you very much.
Since President Donald Trump signed the executive order making, that refugee offer to the Afrikaner community here in South Africa, are there South Africans who have reached out to you as the embassy considering this offer?
We have had no inquiries about this. We have been told that there were probably about a few thousand in the queue for green cards and for scholarships and student representation, etc. So I don't think that falls under the refugee category. I think that is a kind of either immigration or a study tour issue. We've not had any takers for the offer of refugees. And I'm not sure that people with townhouses, farms, or holiday homes and so forth are rushing to take up this offer.
But yeah, because of course, if people are being persecuted as claimed by Trump, that would make sense why they would want to rush to get it. I'm asking that question because the SA Chamber of Commerce in the US says it received over 17,500 or so emails, text calls and messages from South Africans inquiring on behalf of their entire families. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, they said that figure could represent over 50,000 individuals looking to leave South Africa, which was strange because if people want to leave South Africa, they don't go to a business organization. The first point of call, I would imagine, is maybe, or the second one is the embassy in the United States. Have you been in touch with the SA Chamber of Commerce to hear why or where these people are coming from who are reaching out to them?
I am meeting with Mr. Neil Diamond tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock US time, in order to get clarity on this. I also would want to understand what is happening, whether it is a shortcut through the immigration processes that the United States has. Secondly, whether they are indeed coming in as refugees, or most importantly, whether these are simply people who do want to not have the burden of the long process. Very importantly, whether it contradicts Mr. Trump's moratorium on refugees coming into the country is another matter, because that's also an executive order.
Yeah, which is where I wanted to go to next, because I wanted you to help us understand that, because as soon as Donald Trump took office, he announced the suspension of the refugee settlement program that offers safety to some of the most vulnerable refugees in the world. So he suspends a refugee program and then uses the same program he suspended to offer refugee status or resettlement to the Afrikaner group. So what does that mean? So you abolish the U.S. refugee admissions program and then use it to make a proposal. What does that mean for those who really want to take up this offer?
Look, I think we live in very contradictory times, and our job as South Africans would be to explain to the U.S. what it's up about. I'm speaking to you, for example, from the cafeteria of the Senate, where we have been busy all morning trying precisely to explain to U.S. decision makers what are the issues in South Africa, what's the truth about land reform, finding out what the real issues are that's on the mind of the United States decision makers, and then to find a way to chip away at all of those kind of things. I think we're living in very contradictory times, and we can do the best that we can by simply engaging all the time.
Are they willing to engage? Are they even opening that door to hear you? Because it really seems like their minds are made up. They've already taken decisions that are informed by fake news and false propaganda. And I wonder if when you reach out and you want to engage, they're willing to open that door.
Look, I think that we have not had any doors closed on us. Wherever we have asked, we have been able to speak to people, but we are doing it in a very thoughtful way. We are doing it not panic-stricken, that we are destroyed and we are in difficulty and all of those kind of things. Neither are we doing it in a way that is undignified, that we are here with a begging bowl. And so we have simply come here to assert the case for our country, and we have certainly come here to say engagement is the only way forward, and that we are here to be engaged and to engage you.
Yeah. So the president announced that he'll be sending envoys to various countries to explain our position on a number of issues. I imagine the U.S. will be one of the first countries to visit by his envoys. When are our officials getting to the U.S. to start these conversations?
I think that timing is absolutely crucial in doing this. If we come too soon, you will come to the U.S. without a Minister of Commerce or a Secretary of Commerce, without a U.S. Trade Representative. You will come here with the State Department, largely without senior staff that you can speak to, and so forth. So, and you will really come here with the Congress and the Senate busy with so many of their own priorities, getting a budget through and so forth, that you may not find the right audience. I believe that the envoys should be cognizant of the timing. I think certainly our job will be to advise those envoys about what would be the kind of proper timing, and what we are doing, spending our morning and our afternoon in Senate and in Congress, is to soften the ground so that our messages are heard. We must also come here with understanding what are these decision makers worried about and what would they want us to engage them on. It's not going to be one-way agenda from our side. It has to be also responding to the real issues that make up their minds.
Yeah, and just lastly, the challenge here that you have, Ambassador, is that you and our government officials, those envoys, are not the only people that President Donald Trump's advisors and officials are listening to. You've got people like Helen Zille, who spoke to Trump's advisors. AfriForum has spoken to Trump's advisors. I think the DA said they will send its delegation as well. AfriForum says it will be coming to the US. It doesn't seem like we have a coherent common message as South Africa. Looks like we're pulling from different sides. Oh, have we lost the ambassador there? Okay, seems like we've lost the ambassador to the US. That's our ambassador, Ibrahim Rasul. I wanted to know there how difficult. Oh, okay, ambassador, I'm told that you're back now. I was asking earlier, how does it frustrate your job, the fact that you are not the only one that President Donald Trump's advisors are listening to? You've got Helen Zille, who's already met with the advisors. AfriForum has met with the advisors. The DA is sending its own delegation to speak. AfriForum will be coming there to speak to Trump's officials and advisors. So it's not just you and your envoys. And I wonder if that complicates things, the fact that we're pulling from different sides and we don't have a coherent common message.
Look, I think that my confidence is that all of those people must love their country. I'm encouraged by the fact that AfriForum and Solidarity have done significant backtracking now that they've seen the implications of what they have been calling for. I am comforted by the fact that the Democratic Alliance in the Government of National Unity has also refuted the claims of land grabs and expropriation and all of those kind of things. So for me, it makes my job easier if there are particularly those from the affected communities, like the so-called persecuted community of white Afrikaners, who are coming here to say, listen, it's been a bit exaggerated. We didn't expect you to do this. You're actually hurting our country. Can we cool down? I think I'm not going to say don't come. I'm not going to say don't speak to them. I'm saying to them, yes, we are advising Mr. Trump's advisors. We are speaking to the decision makers. You can only strengthen our hand if your common purpose is that you love your country and we want to prevent harm to our country.
Yeah. Ambassador Ibrahim Rasul, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time, and you've got a tough job there in Washington, D.C. All the best. Now, the question we have been asking you tonight is around what's happening in the MK party. What do you make of the internal conflicts in the MK party, including the public spats amongst its members? Let's look at some of the tweets that have come through. Molemi says, every political party has its own internal conflicts. With MK, soon or later, it was bound to happen. Kumo says, I cannot rule out the possibility that the saga between Floyd and Duduzile is staged so that Jacob Zuma can intervene with a threat to expel his own daughter. The veiled message to others is that if he can threaten his own daughter with expulsion, it would be easy to do that to other members. Sbo says Duduzile does not respect the Secretary General. It's a shame that she is compared to Mama Winnie Madikizela Mandela. Throwing insults in the name of the revolution says a lot about the caliber of leaders the MK party has. After the break, we'll discuss what President Donald Trump has been saying about Gaza, and we'll speak to someone who's been doing a lot of work there in Gaza, who is with the United Nations. Stay with us. Welcome back. The US President Donald Trump has said he wants to own and develop Gaza. Trump said in a press briefing and made this announcement, and it has drawn really shocking reactions from both Palestinians and Western critics who say it would be tantamount to ethnic cleansing and illegal under international law. Dr. Navi Pillay is the chair of the United Nations Commission of Inquiry on the Occupied Palestinian Territory, joining us now via Zoom. Dr. Pillay, thank you so much. Always a pleasure to chat to you. Good evening.
Good evening, Clement. Good evening to viewers.
Let's start with maybe clarifying what the law actually says. Under international law, can you have the president of any country just choose a piece of land in another sovereign state and say, I will take that, I'll develop it, and people who live there will not be allowed to return, will resettle them somewhere else? Does international law allow that?
Absolutely not, Clement. And you're good. You started off with that point. All of us understand international law, and international law is very clear. It was developed after World War II, so it's 75 years old now. Who pushed for it? Civil society, you and I. And who else? All states. So all states have agreed to undertake the obligations to implement international law. And there are two regimes here. Under international law, you have to protect civilians first. The thing is on protection, not on their exploitation. The International Court of Justice has recognized the right of self-determination for Palestinians, which spells out that it's their country. They have a right to live there. They've lived there for centuries. The other regime of international law is the law on occupation. And the law on occupation is very clear. The International Court has made it clear. Nobody can grab that land. Nobody can forcibly move people out of there. If they do, then it's a crime of ethnic cleansing. Yeah. And it can constitute many other crimes as well, this forced removal, violation of international humanitarian law, as well as international human rights law. So the law, as I said, is very clear, and so it's outrageous when there is this autocratic claim that they could decide for the Palestinian people without involving them.
So if this is strictly prohibited under international law, what consequences follow such a violation if it goes ahead?
Well, firstly, the International Court of Justice gives an advisory opinion. It's there for the states, and it's for states to ensure that they implement the orders and the advice of the court. They've already done that with a General Assembly resolution that has been supported by an overwhelming majority of states. All of them who've said, we agree with the ICJ advice, and we should now do something to end the unlawful occupation and recognize the right of self-determination for Palestinians. So that's what the court has ruled. That's been agreed on. It's for states to implement that. I think, Clement, in this day and age, if any one individual tries to forcibly remove Gazans, Palestinians, forcibly take their land, it will not be tolerated in this age, because these protections have been implemented over 75 years, as I said.
But then Israel has been able to occupy some sections of Palestine, hasn't it? The United Nations has said that itself, and there still hasn't been any sanction against Israel.
Well, that's a sad fact that states are so divided on these matters. However, it was our commission that recommended to the General Assembly that the root cause of the conflict between Israel and Palestine is the occupation, that it's unlawful and the occupation must end. And a large majority of the GA adopted our recommendation and got the opinion of the court. This has not happened before, so it's a very clear direction from the International Court of Justice on what the responsibilities of states are to end that occupation. Okay. And I think this will be taken seriously.
So Trump's plan is the people of Gaza, even though, because the ceasefire was very clear, part of the conditions of the ceasefire was the people of Gaza can start returning even to the north of Gaza. But Donald Trump now says, well, I want to speak to Jordan, I want to speak to Egypt, I want to speak to some of these countries to take people of Gaza as refugees. He even says, I can give them billions of dollars just so that they can take them. But these are people that are being moved from their home. And I wonder if this is, you think, can have an impact on this ceasefire, because the ceasefire is already fragile now. What harm does talk and proposals like this actually create? Because even the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, has praised Trump's proposal as revolutionary and creative.
You are quite right to point to the harm, because now Netanyahu has become delusional, thinking he could have these powers and things done his way with the help of the U.S. That will not be tolerated by the Middle East. For decades, they've been very clear about the right of return of Palestinians to their land. And even though they've given refuge to Palestinians, they will never cooperate in depriving Palestinians of their traditional lands. I think that's so well established now that those who are talking about grabbing this land to build a Riviera and so on are, I think, shockingly ignorant of international law.
Dr. Navi Pillay, thank you so much. Always a pleasure to chat to you. I really appreciate your time. All right, let's wrap up the show with a few voice notes that have come through responding to that question we've been asking you tonight about what's been happening in the MK party. Let's take a listen.
Hi, I'm Tlajoyo from KZN here. I am terribly disappointed with her. Terribly, terribly so. You know, she would be the last one to do something like this. It's so disappointing. In fact, she has lost respect from me completely.
Sam Aloko Trikopis Clement Dumela. That is unfortunately what will continuously happen to Floyd. There is inevitable contest of leadership position in every party. What intensifies the rivalry in MK party is a sense of ownership. Some people there see MK party as a family business, and it must wholly be under their control. At the same time, it somehow makes sense that in every work, before you can be promoted, you must first be on probation. Bye-bye.
Good evening, Bra Clement. I think Bra Floyd must look for another home, not at MKP. Or he can go back to ANC. Because it seems as many members of the MKP are not happy of Floyd's position. Serious, it's hot there. Robert Nugeri, Kuzana Village, the Bob.
All right, thank you so much for watching the Tuesday edition of Face the Nation. This is how we wrap it up. We'll be back with you on Thursday at 8 p.m. Have a good evening. Cheers.